absolutely marvellous formation, a marvellous piece of flying, and the
So the contrast to that very rapid start to the Typhoon display coming now as it positions round to the left for the slow pass with undercarriage down. Of course, the outstanding manoeuvrability that we have seen on display so far, assisted by the aircraft's digital fly-by-wire control system. That affords artificial stability because the design, like many modern aircraft designs, is inherently unstable, and it also provides for what's Hurricane.
And as we can hear, the JP is well versed in converting fuel into noise. So, no, it wasn't all that smiling.
And the two vampires. From the later marks, the 3, 4 and 5 onwards particularly, because of the very stalky undercarriage it used to have.
Yes, certainly wobbly little affair it was, I think.
It was indeed, not least because they used to operate them off grass runways in the 50s, and I gather that the occasional breakage was not unknown.
And I think it was also retracted pneumatically rather than hydraulically.
Viper engine. It also added ejector seats, strengthened the wings and gave it tip tanks for additional fuel. That came into use in 1999, and the first being used to train air traffic controllers out of Shawbury.
Yes, and we had a pair at Broadie doing forward air controller training as well.
Yes, of course you did, yes. Mark V we see here, developed from the outset by the British Aircraft Corporation. They needed a pressurised cockpit to allow training at higher altitudes. Once again, the Viper engine was uprated and the wings strengthened. The RAF took 110 of these. They came into service in September 1969 and carried on until September 1993. So 25 years ago this month, when the turboprop Shorts Tucano took over. The last two operators, numbers 6 and 1, flying training schools respectively at Finningley and Linton-on-Ouse. But behind the jet provost as they run in now, as I say, the very beautiful de Havilland Vampire, the RAF's second frontline operational jet.
Crab, for some reason or other.
Yes, possibly to do with the rather unusual configuration of the intentions of the early jet engines.
Yes, they were very concerned with the early jet engines about frictional losses thrust in long jet pipes, which is why de Havilland went for this configuration, so they could have a short jet pipe. Of course, in the Meteor, the engines in the wings gave a short jet pipe automatically.
That engine was developed by Frank Halford, de Havilland's engine man, as the Halford H1 before it became a de Havilland product as the Goblin, because de Havilland, of course, developed and built engines as well as airframes.
It was a pair of H1s that fired the first prototype Meteor.
Yes, indeed, because other power plants were delayed.
I think that was done specially for this year.
It was indeed, yes. The Norwegian Air Force's Science Squadron and supporters of the British Airshow circuit. Norway, one of the many overseas countries who bought the Vampire, and they put them into RAF markings, the ones on the two-seater, which I think is leading the formation, and number 4 squadron markings. They flew Vampires as part of the British Air Forces of occupation in Germany post-war, and the single-seater is in number 72 squadron colours. They flew Vampires from Dodium and North Weald, and the Norwegian connection with North Weald is very important to them, because there were so many Norwegian manned squadrons based there during Maastricht. Perhaps the most famous was undertaken by that great naval test pilot, Captain Eric Brown, who made the first landing and takeoff of a jet aircraft on an aircraft carrier with a Mark I Vampire on HMS Ocean on the 3rd of December 1945. And it went on to serve the RAF very well. The FB-5 fighter-bomber variant came into use in 1949. The early day fighter Vampires had a pretty short service life. They served all around the world as well, these aircraft. 2nd Tactical Air Force in Germany used them, the Middle East and Far East Air Forces as well, and they saw a lot of active service in the fight against Malayan terrorists. The two-seat Vampire T-11, in many ways the most significant of all RAF Vampire marks. It was the first jet aircraft on which an RAF pilot would gain their wings. It replaced the North American harbour that we're about to see at the last stage of the flying training school syllabus.
It was also full of weapons that had cannons, single-seater, so it could be used as a weapons trainer as well.
Yes, it's a very effective aeroplane. And while it was just too late to see World War II active service, Vampire certainly continued its operations in other theatres.
They never did build a two-seat training variant of the Venom, and so all the Venom squadrons had a Vampire two-seater for training purposes. But the difficulty was that they hadn't, for some reason, had put the rocket master switch or firing button rather the opposite way around from the Vampire. So one had the transmit button on the throttle and the rocket on the stick, and the other one was the other way around, which caused a great deal of amusement on occasions.
And you know the stages of pilot training, the point at which pilots would be trained prior to moving on to their type operational conversion unit. So the Vampires break down.
Depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own brief life and the long continuity of our institutions and our efforts. The whole worry and might have to wake up to the island or lose the war. We can stand up to it, or Europe may be free. The life of the world may move forward. This world hunted up there. Many will still say, this was their bright hour.
So in front of us now, symbolic of that period of World War II and the RAF's part in it, the Bristol Blenheim leads a pair of Hawker Hurricanes. Fighter configuration, which the Royal Air Force has excelled at the time.
It's huge for single engine trainer and watching them. And one wonders how many of those got sick by the process. The comparative size between the other two is quite obvious there. It is a big aeroplane.
Yeah, it's a pretty ungainly one at that. The Prentice, when it first appeared in 1946, it came into RAF service in 47, was considered to be a major advance on the wartime trainers, particularly the Tiger Moth, that was still in service then, because it had a much more powerful engine, a 250 horsepower de Havilland Gypsy Queen. It had flaps, it had a radio, it had a variable pitch propeller, it even had an all-weather training capability, and would you believe a rudimentary synthetic capability for training at night, which involved the amber cockpit panels you can see on the massive cockpit glazing, and the trainee wearing blue tinted goggles. I'm not sure how successful that would have been.
Never tried it myself, so I've no idea.
Probably a good thing. The aircraft had quite bad handling problems when it first flew, and they did quite a substantial redesign. It had a lack of rudder authority and very poor behaviour in a spin, so they enlarged and revised the fin and rudder, and they gave it the upturned wingtips, which are one of the things that makes it, quite apart from that massive cockpit canopy, so distinctive.
Yes, and presumably anti-spin strakes as well.
It did indeed. The Prentice replaced the Tiger Moth in Flying Training Command, and it was used first of all by the Basic Training Squadron of the Central Flying School at South Cerney, then the RAF College at Cranwell on these aeroplanes.
Yes, and both of them absolutely delightful. The Chipmunk is just like a little fighter. You're sitting there on your own at the front, and superb little handling aeroplane. Of course, we were debating yesterday the benefits and otherwise of tandem or side-by-side seating for instructing.
And your view is?
Well, it's training out, and it demonstrates a lot of the characteristics of those aircraft. It's got its own little quirks, but it's a great aeroplane, particularly to display. You have to use energy management techniques, though, because you can run out of speed and height very quickly if you're not careful.
From this Mark IIB in 1938. This one, this very aeroplane, plays a military charge. It served nearly 70 years at Boston Down in Wiltshire with firstly what was the Aeroplane and Armament Experimental Establishment, the A&AE, and then its various differently named successors. Kinetically, the last of them, it was retired in late 2016. They used it in tail dragger instruction as a slow-speed photo chase and it's still in the yellow markings. It was known as the Yellow Peril. There was at one stage 3 of these yellow harvards at Boston Down that it wore in those days. It was sold to the Aircraft Restoration Company straight after its retirement from service. It's lovely to see it still active in these markings. Station flight had Chipmunks on strength ostensibly for refresher purposes for officers posted there on ground tours, but of course there were great intelligence gathering opportunities to be had. The station just the other side of the wall, and so the decision was taken to start using them with, apart from the pilot, a camera operator in the other seat, equipped with some pretty advanced photographic equipment, controlled on more than one occasion. They were fired at from the ground until the Berlin Wall fell, and then Germany was largest in the back one to accommodate the blind flying hood for instrument flying training. they have to be pulled forward over the rear cockpit for that purpose. The seat instructor takes it via the Duxford tube with a funnel at one end and stethoscope-style earpieces at the other. And on the front canopy, you may have noticed if you saw the aircraft on the ground earlier, there's a rear view mirror, so the instructor could see where the student was looking, which was very important. The structure was also beefed up a bit, and the 130 horsepower Gypsy Major engine-powered Tiger Moth 2, which became the major production version. More than 7,000 Tiger Moths ended up being built in the UK. In excess of 4,000 of those were manufactured during World War II for the Royal Air Force, because it had come into service following the first flight in 1931 with both the RAF in 1932 and many civilian customers before the war. About almost 12 weeks in wartime at a British-based elementary flying training school. They do 50 hours of flying in that period, including 5 hours under the hood of instrument flying training, 5 hours of navigation exercises, including the first solo cross-country, and at least 25 hours of new instruction. During that time, they progressed from their initial air experience eventually to aerobatics. Quite a lot of Tigers were shipped from RAF stocks out to southern Rhodesia for use by the elementary flying training schools there that were formed under the Empire and British Commonwealth Air Training Scheme. Others, with enclosed cockpits to help keep out the cold, were operated in Canada. Described as a wingless, waterlogged and derelict hulk of the airframe, was sold for just £80, and that airframe was brought here to Duxford in the early days of the IWM and then East Anglian Aviation Society presence here, while it was in the ownership of a society member. 20 years for airfield air training about their presence.
Now, if you advance order the DVD or Blu-ray today, you get to take away a free DVD called Airshow Action Level. Today, but here's come the German fighters, the Messerschmitt Bf-109s, depicted here by three Berlin-engined Spanish Hispano HA-1112 Bouchons. Now, while we have them here playing as they've done so often over the years, the Bf-109s, we recall an event that has a great Duxford connection in its own right, because 50 years ago this year, all three of these aircraft and the fourth Bouchon that's out on the flight line still, the two-seat example, were here to make that legendary movie, Battle of Britain. Duxford this weekend, a gentleman by the name of Connie Edwards, who's over from Texas. He was one of the movie pilots back in 1968 after the filming was completed. Several of the Bouchons went to him as part payment for his work on the film. They were taken to his premises at Big Spring in Texas. They spent many years in storage there, perfectly preserved, and it's made their return to flight in recent years a little easier as the population of Bouchons burgeons once again. So we extend a very warm welcome to Connie, and even though the Bouchons are going to be tangling with Yak 3s in a few moments in the skies over Duxford rather than Hurricanes or Spitfires,
Yak 3 was more than a match, it soon turned out, for its German contemporaries, the Messerschmitt RAF100 model and the Focke-Wulf FW190. 75 years ago, this summer, when they really engaged in combat for the first time in the Battle of Kursk from July to August 1943.
Watchkin LA5 and LA7 with the Yak 9.
It was a very effective point defence fighter, the Yak 3. Very fast and agile in all regimes, especially at low level. The most famous of all Yak 3 squadrons, indeed one of the two aircraft in this display, carries its markings, was the Normandie-Niemen Squadron, Régiment de Chasse 3 of the Free French Air Force. It was set up in 1942 after Germany invaded the USSR in an effort to increase ties between the Free French under de Gaulle and the Soviets. It was initially named simply Normandie, but later it was changed to reflect its part in efforts to liberate territory around the Niemen River in the Soviet Union. They flew the Yak 7 and Yak 9 before converting to the Yak 3, and the last 99 of its 273 confirmed aerial kills were scored in Yak 3s. Take long after the end of World War II for the Soviets to become anything but allies. So that completes our look at the Russian front, and in the context of this show at aircraft that were adversaries of RAF aeroplanes at different periods, I have the 617 Squadron Dan Buster's tribute. was a design that made a good deal of use of captured wartime German technology, the Germans having pioneered swept-wing jet designs with the likes of the Messerschmitt Me 262, but there was British influence in the engine, because while the Soviets had access to German engine technology, they thought that British efforts were superior, especially the Rolls-Royce Neen, and rather to the surprise of many, they obtained a license from the British government, and the Neen was produced as the Klimov RD-45, which they later improved as the VK-1, and it's that powers the MiG-15. The specification was aimed to combat high-flying enemy bombers. So it was given heavy cannon armament for that purpose. It flew not long after what would become its most famous opponent over Korea, the North American F-86 Sabre, and right from the start, the MiG-15, which first took to the air in December 1947, was able to exceed 1,000 kilometers an hour, nearly 650 miles an hour, at an altitude of 3,000 meters, 9,800 feet. Came into service in 1949. It first went to war the following year. That was towards the end of the Chinese Civil War, when the Chinese communists were receiving Soviet assistance. A division of examples of the MiG-15 BIS version was deployed, and they scored their first aerial victory against, of all things, a Lockheed P-38 Lightning, the Chinese nationalist side. Soviet and Norwegian aeroplanes. This is an extremely appropriate aircraft, of course, to include, not just because of its operational history with the RAF, but also as a result of the significant RAF and British industry influence in it becoming such an outstanding fighter. The reason it came about was to meet a Royal Air Force requirement. A superior fighter of its own. It came up with a design known as the NA-73, and it took just 102 days, famously, for it to go from the drawing board to first flight, which was on the 26th of October 1940. Now at that stage, the Mustang used the Allison B-1710 engine, as did most of the Curtiss P-40 variants, and indeed the new build Yak-3s that we saw earlier. However, an Allison-engined Mustang came here to Duxford for evaluation by the Air Fighting Development Unit. lieutenants assigned to RAF Coastal Command were awarded the Victoria Cross. One of them was from the Royal Canadian Air Force, Flight Lieutenant David Hornell of number 162 Squadron. The other was from number 210 Squadron, Flying Officer John Cruikshank. The citation of his VC makes for very sobering reading.
When a U-boat was sighted on the surface, Flying Officer Cruikshank at once turned to the attack. In the face of fierce anti-aircraft fire, he manoeuvred into position and then ran in to release his depth charges. Unfortunately, they failed to drop. Without hesitation, he climbed and turned to come in again. The Catalina was met by intense and accurate fire and was repeatedly hit. The navigator bomb aimer was killed. The second pilot and 2 other members of the crew were injured. Flying Officer Cruikshank was struck in 72 places, receiving 2 serious wounds in the lungs and 10 head collapsed, and the second pilot took over the controls. He recovered shortly afterwards and, though bleeding profusely, insisted on resuming command and retaining it until he was satisfied that the damaged aircraft was under control, that the course had been set for base, and that all the necessary signals had been sent. Only then would he consent to receive medical aid and have his wounds attended to. He refused morphia in case it might prevent him from carrying on. During the next 5.5 hours of the return flight, he several times lapsed into unconsciousness owing to loss of determination, fortitude and devotion to duty in keeping with the highest traditions of the service.
Survived that heroic action over the Atlantic. He's still alive today, aged 98, when plain sailing took this Catalina to the RAF Lucas Airshow in Scotland a few years ago. Cruikshank was able to rekindle his association once more. Coastal Command, Boeing B-17G Flying Fortress Sally B. Wasn't a success. 8 fortresses of that squadron had been lost by September 1941, and soon Bomber Command abandoned daylight raids. In fact, fully half of all number 90 squadrons' missions with the Fortress had been aborted without bombs being dropped. That early experience showed that the B-17 needed better defensive armament, a bigger bomb load, and better bomb aiming equipment. The US Army Air Corps, as it was, US Army Air Forces as they became, hadn't of course come into the war by that point. So they had no combat experience of the B-17. With the RAF's experience, it meant that the Army Air Forces would have all of those attributes on their B-17s as were deployed to Europe from 1942. It was that August that the 8th Air Force carried out its first raid on B-17 from the 97th Bomb Group at Polbrook in Northamptonshire. The target were the railway marshalling yards at Rouen in France, as the Atlantic Gap. That was an area of the North Atlantic in which the German U-boat aircraft not been returned from operation. others stay here. As so many aircraft return from operations, it's dedicated to all the members of the Sally B Supporters Club.
That's the organisation that works tirelessly to raise funds towards the
Sally B in.
preservation.
Here come the two fallen Nat T1s of the Nat display team. And oh, the gentlest of touchdowns by Peter and the controls of the B-17.
The aircraft most famed, of course, as the former mount before the BAE Hawks we're going to see later of the Royal Air Force Red Arrows aerobatic team.
But it was also one of the great RAF fast jet trainers of the 1960s, entering service with the Central Flying School in February 1961. And number 4 Flying Training School at RAF Valley on Anglesey was the RAF's primary NAT operator. And we're very proud to be joined on the Flying Control Committee this weekend by two gentlemen, two extremely distinguished retired Royal Air Force gentlemen who trained on the NAT in the form of Tom Eales and the committee's chairman. It's Tom, to start with you. How do you remember your first association with the NAT?
Well, I was terrified of it to start with, because it was so small. You put it on like an overcoat. As soon as it started to move across the taxiway, you were actually flying it. And having just come from the Jet Provost and probably not performed particularly brilliantly, being put in this pocket rocket ship was quite terrifying. But it was fantastic fun, especially with this great long peterhead sticking out of the front. It was like riding a magic broomstick. Absolutely wonderful.
And Rick, I know this is the opinion pretty much shared by you, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's a fantastic aircraft. Over 1,000 hours on the aircraft. It's a real good sports car. I love flying it.
You said yesterday it was an airplane that taught you so much, that was so relevant to flying aircraft such as the Lightning.
It did. It went into service partly to train pilots to fly the Lightning. I mean, the swept wing characteristics, the speed, supersonic just. The instrumentation inside was very much designed to sort of help you transfer the Lightning and other aircraft too. It had so much going for it inside. It was just a dream to fly. It certainly prepared me well for the Lightning.
And Tom, you too also instructed on the type, didn't you?
I did, and it was extremely difficult to see anything out of the front. And all you could see was the back of the pilot's ejection seat and his large head. So in the circuit, you always prayed for a crosswind from the right, so you could look out sideways. And there's a little tiny airspeed indicator up on the left-hand coaming, which gave you a speed from 100 to 150 knots. And that was the sector airspeed indicator. better. And night flying was a complete nightmare because we were all alone.
RAF fast jet pilots, the Follow Nat T1. When the RAF decided it needed a replacement for the in the communications and light transport role, it was decided to select a variant of the Prince able to carry up to 8 passengers with various modifications for military service. The Devon, as the RAF renamed the Dove, and entered service first in 1948 with number 31 Squadron at Hendon in North London. Transport As far as the Pembroke was concerned, perhaps its most unusual role was photographic reconnaissance. They were employed for those duties during the Malayan emergency configuration and performed that rather hazardous work for many years. On more than one occasion, the Pembrokes involved in the Berlin corridor reconnaissance flights were shot at by Soviet MiGs. They all had The Devon leading this formation was built by de Havilland at its plant at Harden near Chester, and among its various assignments it spent some time in the use of Air Chief Marshal Sir Basil Embry, the Commander Allied Forces Central. Yeah.
RAF aerobatic team, the Red Arrows! Red 1 leading the aircraft over in big battle formation, the patriotic red, white and blue smoke trailing behind. As the smoke changes to white, Red 1 banking to the left and changing to the next formation, short diamond. Red 1 for 2018 is squadron leader Martin Pert. Martin is a former Harrier and Typhoon pilot. He's previously served on the team, he's been a Hawk instructor, and he returns to the Red Arrows in his first year as the team leader. Red 1 leads short diamond off to our right-hand side. You'll notice he uses a very metronomic cadence, giving his voice commands on the radio. The pilot's responding to his commands rather than what his aircraft does, which is what keeps those lines very straight and the shapes very symmetrical. As the smoke comes back on for short diamond, we're transitioning into the first of our RAF aircraft formations. You saw it displaying earlier on today. It's currently on operations in the Middle East and defending the skies of the UK 24 hours a day. It is, of course, Typhoon. As the formation banks to the right, Red 1 will pull the nose up, the smoke will come on, ready for the Typhoon roll.
Easy off.
Upside down at 2,500 feet, the distinctive Typhoon showing against the cloudy skies here. On the right of Red 1 in Typhoon is Red 2, Flight Lieutenant John Bond. John is a former Typhoon instructor and display pilot. He's in it.
Now. Holding the back. Now, tighten.
On the right wing tip of lightning is Red 4, Flight Lieutenant Chris Lyndon Smith. Chris is a former instructor who's previously served on the team and has returned in his second year back as Red 4. Well, as lightning moves off to the right-hand side, it's time for a very technically difficult formation. 6 aircraft all forming up in line abreast with Reds 8 and 9 joining on the outside. Reds 6 and 7 tucking in behind in Phoenix. On the left of Red 1 in Phoenix is Red 3, Squadron Leader Mike Ling. Mike has previously served as a display pilot on the team. He then did 6 years as Red 10 and returns as Red 3 for the 2018 season. And he'd like to say a big hello to Nick and Isla. Upside down the formation goes at 2,500 feet. White smoke against the white sky, the nose light showing, and the distinctive red platform of the Hawks. On the left wing, of course, is Red 5, Flight Lieutenant Bill Rose. And is a former Typhoon pilot and weapons instructor. He's on his second year with the team, and I'd like to say hello to his mum, dad, and Jules. Excited as he calls aboard. Let's listen to him in Tornado. Ridiculous. The red and blue smoke comes on as 8 and 9 roll around the rest of the formation. Red 1 about to bank around to the left with a smoke change in Tornado.
Now. Holding the back. Now, take. Okay.
Great go for Enid, calls red 1. Here they go in the split, and here comes Jippo. Here they come for the spectacular Jippo pass. About to reverse, ready for the next maneuver. Now look out to your front right. Here comes Enid. Red 1 has taken in the goose. Red 9 pulling up with the patriotic red, white and blue smoke. As red 1 banks Enid around to the right. To take away for the next jump. Now red 6 changing smoke colour as they go in the vortex. Up through the middle comes red 8, Lieutenant Matt Martin. As synchro move off to the left and right, the smoke goes off to make way for the... to roll twice in a snake-like shape across the sky. This is the formation flown here is called Venus Benefit, with red 1 at the front. Corkscrew. There go, the signal for 4 and 5 to roll. Ready for the spectacular Jippo break. Mix and break. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching the Red Arrows!
And pulling up.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching the Red Arrows!
The world war by their prowess and by their devotion. Never in the field of human conflict was so much hope by humanity. That he will have to break us in this island all over the war. We can stand up to him, all Europe